Hey guys. Just here to let you know that this story was produced as part of an online writing class led by author Meagan J. Meehan, the author from last week's story. Holding a bachelor's degree in English literature, a master's degree in communication, and currently working on a PhD in educational psychology, Meagan designed the writing class series. Each one is 8 weeks long, entirely online, and ends with every story being produced via an audio narration on YouTube and published in an anthology. The full price of the 8-week class, including the narrated story, anthology inclusion, and one free copy of the published book, is $2.95 per person. However, anyone who is a subscriber of this channel will be charged a discounted price of $2.85. There's a limit of 35 people per class. The next class is tentatively scheduled to begin in December of 2020, approximately 2 months after the release of the initial anthology. So, if you're interested in signing up, email Meagan J. Meehan at artsycreativeint@gmail.com or leave a comment below, and that is creative with an 8. It's on the screen somewhere. You can find it. Alright, that's all for now. Enjoy the story, and I'll see you guys next week. Do I know where Annie Vee is? That was what I asked myself when I ventured into the Akatarawa forest one late afternoon. The forest itself was one of 3 major bushlands that surrounded my hometown Upper Hutt. Up north, under the shadow of the Turehu mountain ranges, was the Kaitoki Regional Park. On the right, facing the eastern end of New Zealand, was the Pakaratahi, while the Akatarawa forest stood at the opposite end. All were more than an hour's drive away from the capital city of Wellington. Though the Upper Hutt region possessed one of the largest areas in the lower North Island, it has the lowest population with no more than 40,000 people. The city itself was landlocked. 2 mountain ranges were at either side. Forests, bushlands, and hills occupied much of the region, with most of the population residing within an open sea of grass, where the city was located. That was fine. I made the most of my hometown, as much as anyone who had lived here. I preferred living here, surrounded by nature skyscrapers, rather than be blinded by the constant stream of lights that the capital city normally gets. There was also a rather intimate vibe that covered the city from border to border. Though I wouldn't say that everyone knew each other, I can honestly say that each person recognized something about the others. The woman ordering a pavlova every Friday night, she was an English teacher at the local high school. The man who filled his petrol every morning at 6 a.m. was an owner of a local business. Each person knew something about the other. That was the nature of Upper Hutt. It also helped that most residents spent their weekends almost at the same time and at the same place. There were always familiar faces, whether it was rugby, cricket, football, or the classic Sunday barbecue in one of the parks. As for me, I was more than glad that there were not any faces during my explorations. Abandoned structures within the Akatarawa forest were hidden gems. It was common knowledge that somewhere within the vast and tight bushes were empty settlements. These places would have been quite an idyllic sight nearly 100 years ago. They were made by people who wanted nothing more than quiet solitude. The only company they sought were the songs of the Tuis singing their hymns during spring. These settlers had tried. They had failed. They had tried again. New structures, bigger and grander than before, were created to tame the land. None of it was successful. All that remained were empty husks that I was more than happy to break inside. I'd like to say that it was illegal to enter these properties. A local representative for the government's Ministry of Cultural Affairs had issued a law claiming that anyone caught trespassing would be fined $3,000 with a possibility of 2 months in jail for damages. That was fine on paper, Then again, who on earth would dare enter these settlements? The Upper Hut Council may have hired a team to patrol the first 3 kilometers of the Akatarawa forest, but that was a small portion. It was impossible to count how many houses lay dormant within the thick bushlands. Even if the patrols had managed to track every run-down building, what were the chances that they were present after dusk? No one was out in the forest at 8 o'clock. I was sure of it. The only ones present were me and Annie Vee. I loved Annie Vee. She was an unusual but attractive girl with long black hair, velvet eyes, and a set of freckles that I enjoyed counting during long, quiet nights. If not for her habit of venturing into the forest, I was sure that she would have stolen the attention of Upper Hut. Annie had explained that the main reason why she enjoyed venturing into the Akatarawa was that of the mysteries. There was more than meets the eye, she said. A week wouldn't pass without me finding a note from her saying that she was doing some exploring. That girl loved her adventures among the 3 forests that surrounded Upper Hut. That was perfectly fine. I myself was guilty of disappearing into the thick undergrowth of my region. Most of my leave from work was discovering ruined settlements after another. It was also during one of my explorations that I had stumbled upon Annie Vee. I was very, very lucky to meet her. I'd also want to confess that despite doing these expeditions for over a decade, that girl knew more than I ever could. I eventually found her on the 2nd floor of an empty 4-story lodge. The building was one of the largest settlements inside the Akatarawa. It had once served as a resting stop for travelers who wanted more than a pile of leaves as their pillow. The building was nestled near an abandoned track. There was a well at the back end. A stable that could house 4 horses were 100 meters to the right. The current decayed state of its front hall exceeded far more than most 3-star hotels. I knew you would come for me, Daniel, Annie Vee said, lying cross-legged on the floor. The red shirt and knee-length skirt that she had worn when she left were no more than torn strips. She hunched herself forward, pressing her hands over a large exposed wound near her thighs. I pulled off my backpack. I brought a first aid kit, Annie. I love how much you care about me. She brushed her palms over her mouth. It's nothing, Daniel. I heal fast, remember? Something as puny as this won't kill me. I just need a moment. Even the best of us need some rest, eh? You do that as well after you work out in the gym. Right, and I'm pretty sure that everybody has a girlfriend that can devour anything she likes. I dropped the bag. One kick, and it slid towards her. Here, I also got you some new clothes. Annie giggled as she opened the zip and rummaged through its contents. Oh, you always think ahead, darling. You even brought my favorite sweater with you. The one with the pictures of the tiny deer. I should really give you a hug. Just put some clothes on, Annie. I strained my attention towards a thick mist that was slowly marching its way towards the building. I had seen bits and pieces of it from my search of Annie. It was not unusual for that to happen. Between the months of June to August, the winter clouds from the Turehu ranges would descend over my town in the early morning. The city was drowned under a sea of fog at those times. The mist that slithered towards us was almost similar. I guess this is the part where I'm supposed to say sorry, she apologized, pulling her long black hair out from the sweater. She limped towards me and gave me a short kiss. I responded with a longer version. My hands were on her shoulders. I felt her nails clawing against my jacket. She let go. Her index finger pressed against the tip of my chin. I missed you, darling. It's been, 2 days since we last saw each other? Time goes fast when you're out hunting in these woods. How are things back home, Daniel? Is the head librarian still pissed at me? I bet she is. She hasn't met anyone who keeps requesting for leave nearly every week. But, just like my sisters said, you can't let the hunger starve itself. I'm just glad I found you. I rubbed her shoulders. It took me a good 4 hours to find you in these thick bushlands. You mean you went searching for me today? After work? Wow, dedication, Danny. That was fast. I love that about you. How did you know this was the right place to look? I laughed and brushed her hair back. Because you're Annie Vee. I've known you long enough that I know that your top 3 favorite places are this building, an abandoned railway, and a clearing near a stream. The last one is my favorite. She wrapped her hands around my sides. That's the place where I nearly killed you. Remember? What a perfect setting. Pity that it has no roof, though. Not the best place to stay in winter. I was planning to go there during the weekend if you hadn't decided to leave. Sorry. She pushed herself off of me. She limped 4 steps back, nearly stumbling on the 3rd. Blood soaked through the fabric as she placed both hands on her hips. But I left a note on the kitchen table 3 days ago along with some sweets that I tried to bake that day. I scratched my head. We'll plan something else for the weekend then. Oh, how about the Sunday barbecue that your parents are preparing for their local bowls club? I heard that they're quite eager to get to know me more. Want to go? I doubt you'll be hungry after this, I sighed. I swear, things would be easier if you at least notified me when you're going out. Even a text message would be useful. You don't know how many close calls I had with the police to find you. I nearly stumbled into one of the mayor's cronies on my way. I said I was sorry. She puffed her cheeks. I sighed. I know. There are some things that you must. Annie's ears twitched before I finished my sentence. She paced towards a barred window. Her ears stretched back. The whites of her eyes turned black. She bared her teeth. Long nails made deep scratches against the wall. Outside, basking under the shadow of thick trees, the mist had stood still amid the building's property. It didn't fade or thin out. Its outline reminded me of a dying neon light. It blinked on and off. A carpet of cloud was there in one instant and gone in the next. The hunter has become the hunted, I said out loud. She smiled. I know! Isn't it exciting? I knew they would come for me and I was right. What is it this time, Annie? Bakeyas? Panatoris? Mairos? Turehu, she said, as she leaned her face against the glass. Those little things. I crossed my arms. I thought they posed no problem for you. They don't, until I learned too late that they had invited their 2 meter cousins from the Waikato. There must have been 20 or 30 of them when I attacked the camp. All were protecting their smaller cousins. Those bastards fought a bloody good fight, though. This wound was caused when they sent me flying down a small hill. Lucky hit, I say. The giants then ran down the hill to try and finish me off. Bad mistake. They underestimate my breed since I took most of them down. My injury was worth it because they were simply delicious. I can still hear their whimpers as I gutted their bellies open. Oh, I want to relive having their organs running down my throat. And let me guess, a whole army of these white-skinned, red-headed fairies are here to get revenge against you. She grinned. You say it like it's a bad thing, Daniel. Just watching them makes my stomach growl. If you could taste it like I did, I swear you would hunt every one of them. That's how good they are, but then again, I can't spoil myself to eradicate my food supply. I left the scene off as soon as I had my fill, but as luck would have it, they managed to track me down here. Not bad for creatures no bigger than children, And I suspect that you want me to drive them away with my torch. The Turehu hate light, eh? True, or you can tell them that it was all a misunderstanding. Tell them I got carried away a bit. You can give them 2 sacks of raw kumara to eat. They like that. She said this whilst pushing her face off the glass. Light tapping began to echo from the ground floor. Yeah, nah, Annie Vee. I'm not sure you noticed, but the whole forest floor is covered with them. There must be hundreds of those fairy folk waiting outside. More the reason to devour them until they leave the 2 of us alone. I pulled my bag off the floor and tapped her head with it. Or we could wait it out until dawn. There's a makeshift bedroom that I made months before at the back end of the 4th floor. It's my emergency shelter if I'm doing long explorations. There's a mattress, heaps of canned food, and a good supply of torches. She shifted her features back to, I would say, normal. Boring. Can't I just go out and eat them? Can I? Annie, you're bleeding. You can't even walk right. What would your sisters think if they knew that their youngest sibling was killed by a Turehu? Fine, you have a point. She rolled her eyes. Come on, we'll be safe behind my shelter. A few more hours and it'll be dawn. She puffed her cheeks again. You got something to eat while we're there. I lifted my bag. I'm surprised that you hadn't checked the back pocket. I got food. Venison, your favorite. Annie Vee snickered before she wrapped her arms around me. You have always been the reliable case. Fine. I'll play your game, Daniel. 4 hours, you say, darling. That's a lot of time to enjoy to ourselves, I placed her right arm around my neck. Think of it as a date, Annie. And, if the worst comes, you'll be my moral support. I hope it does. I hope that the Turehu do attack us. Oh, the thought of quartering those albino fairies with you by my side, it's exhilarating. I can see it. I can taste it. Give me your hand, Daniel. Here. Can you hear it, darling? Can you? My heart is racing at the thought of that. I had encountered the Turehu before. The Maori called them Patupaiarehe, and claimed that these pale-skinned folks were the original inhabitants of New Zealand. They were primitive, territorial, and secluded. The countless children's books of my local library described them to have a lighter complexion than the Maori, with bright red hair and standing no bigger than a human child. That was the general rule, though the Turehu that Annie had encountered were most likely from the central regions of Wanganui. How or why the Turehu resided among the forest of my region still escaped me. Nearly every tale or piece of information that I've heard of had told me that they primarily lived in the central regions of the North Island. The beauty-lusted plains of the Waikato, the thick bushlands of the Te Aroha Range, the hills of Rotorua, and the lands surrounding Urawira and Wairoa, these were the home bases of the eluded fairy folk. I had never been informed that Upper Hutt and possibly other regions of the lower North Island were home to the Turehu. Was it because these folks were more secluded than their central cousins? It was common knowledge that they avoided people. For nearly every encounter with them, it was they who dished it out first. Even my own fair share with these creatures was often a good distance away. I had only seen traces of them during my explorations. It was usually at night, twilight hours at best, that they appeared. Often, it was in the form of a mist that faded off as soon as someone gets too close. Sometimes, it looked like a cloud had decided to rest within the thick bushes of the Akatarwa before flying off the next day. There was no hiding this time. From outside the building, the Turehu filled every nook and cranny until it felt as if night had turned to dawn. Their bright red hair replaced the trees. I couldn't hear the howling southerlies that passed through Upper Hutt from the South Island. Such was the nature of living in mountains. My home city was a bottleneck for the gales, not as powerful as the capital city, but strong enough for fleets of clouds to sail through a windstorm. The only noise heard from inside of the building, however, was the constant tapping that filled my ears until my brain wanted to explode. There was also the sound of a flute, ringing from the forest's floor. The Maori had numerous tales of what the Turehu do to trespassers. The numerous bodies that had been dug up around the Waikato proved that the fairies enjoyed burying people alive. Most of these victims were young men who had been found underneath a thick patch of kumara, which the creatures feasted. There weren't a lot of cases of female deaths, save for 1 or 2 over the last 50 years. Even the women who were presumed to have been captured held the account that they could not remember anything. Which was fine, though the numerous accounts of Maori tribes who claimed to be descendants of the Turehu were a stab in the back of the former claim. It was a weak cloak that poorly hid away the creature's lust. I think Annie Vee was going to have neither. The midget fairies had their own specific execution in mind. What it was, I don't know. I can only imagine the punishment being long and torturous. I was going to have none of that. I held Annie Vee close with one arm over my shoulder. She grabbed my other hand and pressed it around her waist. She limped. She stumbled. The wound on her thighs failed to recover. All the while, her ears twitched at each sound. She growled, hissed. Her eyes turned coal black. Her mouth began to stretch ear to ear. Deep scratches littered the building's floor as her feet turned to claws. When I asked her if she needed a break, Annie Vee simply told me that she was fine. Typical. She explained that while hunting for deer or wild boars, she had stumbled into a large community of Turehu near the northern ends of Akatarawa. Like I said, that was unusual, since these creatures primarily resided in the central plains of the country. Sure, there were fragments of them sighted around, but not as many as she had seen. Annie guessed that they must have numbered near 1,000. Was there a celebration? Was it a mimicry of a flat-warming party? Was it a reunion of different families around the North Island? It didn't really matter, though. The taste of these fairies was leagues above the typical wild game. Annie's need to satisfy her hunger was all there was to it. She had lunged into the tribe. She had killed most of their 2-meter cousins and devoured over 100 fairies. When the Turehu finally managed to repel her, they had lost a good number of their kin. It was no surprise that they had decided to give chase. That was a bad idea. The sight of an army of fairies simply made Annie hungrier. I had seen her in her true form. I knew what she was capable of. A deep scar near my neck was proof that Annie was more than happy to eat people. She could break the backs of 10 men piled on top of each other. A family of 6 could easily fit inside her jaws. She was as dangerous as she was beautiful. Yet, despite her strength, Annie was only one against an army. The Turehu could storm the building, drag her out, and take her back to the tribe to exact revenge. I wasn't going to let that happen. I understand that the Turehu wanted justice for their deceased. Everyone does. But I simply wasn't going to lose Annie that way. She was the real reason why I enjoyed exploring the dark corners of my country. Annie Vee had shown me things and creatures that no other person had dared to imagine. She, in turn, was very grateful for my companionship. Her breed were shapeshifters who scoured the country to satisfy their hunger. A full stomach weighed over any concern on the type of prey they had killed. It didn't matter if the prey was a rat, a rabbit, a fairy, or a person. Annie was no exception. She was curious about what humans tasted like. Her sisters, who had infiltrated the biggest towns of the country, had teased her for not having a body count. And, to prove them wrong, she stalked the Akatarawa for the right opportunity, the right victim to strike. The memories of her sharp nails piercing my head as I was lifted off the ground are still fresh. How long ago was it? 2 years? A year since I met her? One moment I was taking a rest from a long hike. The next I was facing a beast that ate elephants for breakfast. She could have killed me right there and then. My head was trapped. One squeeze and it would have been over. We were both grateful that none of that occurred. I confess that despite truly loving her, I still don't know why she wanted to be a part of human life. Unlike her sisters who played the games of society to feast, Annie was committed to try and adapt to this way of life. She appeared one day in front of my apartment and had been there ever since. My colleagues at the local mechanic garage took notice. I'm still waiting for the day when they stop asking me about how I scored an attractive woman. Annie, at a distance, was a curious woman who knew more about the New Zealand landscape and history than most people. Even my parents, who were both avid historians, wondered how or where Annie had got the information she possessed. Our relationship wasn't perfect, despite what other people said. She was, by all accounts, a hunter, a pure carnivore whose only goal was to consume. She may have spared my life, but that didn't mean she had crossed humans off her menu. I had tried my best at first to stop her from ripping the jugular off people's throats, but Annie Vee was relentless. It didn't take long before she came home one night while gnawing off the head of a rugby player. I was neither shocked nor surprised. Her first human victim would come one way or another. Unfortunately for that poor bastard, he had stumbled in at the wrong place at the wrong time. I let Annie Vee continue after that. Should I feel guilty? Remorseful? At least twice a month, Annie and I scoured the streets of my hometown, looking for a right candidate. The woman who came from a party, the teenager who left home, the homeless bum that stalked the streets, all were up for game. And if, by chance, we stumbled to a more, I would say, decent member of society, the happier Annie Vee would be. It was not a revenge against the authorities. I simply believed that it was better for one person to die than for the whole city to be devoured. Besides, I think I would have done Upper Hutt a big favor by letting Annie devour the homeless, the poor, the weak, the unfavorable. She was happy when I helped sate her hunger. Annie Vee, in gratitude, made more effort to fit into human society. I was surprised when she came back home with the news that she had been accepted in the local library. It was an amazing thought to think that the woman in charge of looking after young children saw them as a food supply. I loved Annie Vee more after that. I bolted the door once we reached the former stockroom at the end of the 4th floor. I grabbed 5 torches just as we heard the building's front door entrance slam open. The Turehu were here. The tapping got louder. The sounds of flute filled each space that the building offered. And then there was a voice. No, that was not it. It was an ocean of voices calling out Annie's name repeatedly. All were in unison. Each call was accompanied with loud bangs and kicks against the walls. They were close. Annie Vee growled and shouted back. She clawed at the door as the tapping, the banging, and the calling of her name lay outside our stall. I pulled her down towards the mattress. I covered her ears. I kissed her lips, and all the while I felt her nails scratching through my jacket. I told myself, screamed inside my head, that waiting was all we could afford to do. It was impossible for the Turehu to keep this up forever. Soon, dawn would arrive, and the fairies would have no choice but to leave, empty-handed, back to their lands without any trace of justice for their slain kin. We would be safe by then. We simply must endure for the moment. I'm here, Annie, I'm here. I pulled my face away from hers. She blinked. Her face softened to the woman I had grown to love. I felt her hands on my side and gasped as she rolled me over. She was on top of me. A small trace of gore remained in her mouth when she said, "Should we tell everyone the real story?" I chuckled as Annie lowered herself to my chest. I burrowed my nose over her head. I pulled her hair down. My fingers played with her soft black locks. For the 25th time, I laughed. I doubt anyone is going to believe us. She hugged me tighter and snuggled in closer. One of her legs was wrapped over mine. Who in their right mind would believe that we spent the night hiding inside a stall from an army of vengeful fairies? Would the children you're looking after believe you? Of course, she giggled. Those juicy little bodies will believe anything I say, though their parents will call the tale off as no more than a Red Riding Hood type. That's fine. If I have you, Daniel, I don't care if the whole country is against us. If that doesn't work, you can tell them stories about fairies. She laughed. Who's the twisted one here? You're going to make me hungry if I read something like that to the kids. You know that I desire to eat them. I don't want the head librarian to come inside the children's creche and see a room full of ghoul. Then I'd be like, whoops, my fault for skipping breakfast. How about a story about plants? I doubt it. You don't last a minute in the vegetable section before you look like you want to puke and you bolt to the nearest meat section. Just tell your boss that you're sick after you got yourself lost in the woods. Only for my prince to come to rescue me, she giggled. I'll go with your idea though. I need a whole day to get the images of those sweet, delicious and juicy fairies out of my head. Take it easy, Annie. You deserve it after what you've been through. Once we get back, I'll find something to properly wrap those wounds. We might even go to the local abandoned warehouse to see if anyone else is hanging around. She kissed me on the cheeks. Until then, I am a very happy girl to have you at my side for the moment. Ah, Daniel, I love you more than anyone could. Those eyes, those beautiful green eyes that you possess. I always ask why you never showed any fear when I tried to kill you back then. What is it that you see in me besides being no more than a monster, a hungry thing that can never be satisfied? I pinched her nose. From talking about children to confessing your reason in loving me, you always were the dramatic type, Annie Vee. You're welcome, she smiled. There was a tap on the door. Annie looked up. A low growl came from her mouth as she bared her knife-sharp teeth. The tap made way to a knock, then a bang, and a kick. It didn't take long before the thumps outside resembled that of a child hurling its own weight against the door. They're basically throwing themselves. I raised my head to see the torches that I set up jumping each time the door rattled. Let them come in. They're going to regret disturbing us. I don't care if there's 1,000 out there or 2. No one is going to hurt my darling. Easy there, Annie. I grabbed her shoulders. Those fairies won't come inside with the light shining against the door. I got heaps of spares if the batteries die out. Oh? What makes you think that it'll work? There could be 100 of those midgets standing outside. A little light like that isn't going to stave all of them. My decision still stands, Daniel. If worst comes to worst, they're going to greet their loved ones in my belly. And if you're right, then I hope that there will be a few stragglers left once morning comes. Does every problem have to be solved by eating? Of course, she smirked. Thinking about them makes my stomach moan. They are delicious. Very delicious. Oh, I wish to relive those moments when I bit off their heads and slurped their insides through the neck. I shook my head. No wonder they're pissed. It's their fault for tasting so good. I deserve some of them, since all I'll be getting back at our home will be cooked meat. Yuck. Ugh, I can never get used to it, Daniel. Meat should be eaten raw, not over a fire. And don't start with me about salads. That abominable excuse for food is meant for cows and potential prey. And what about the people that we hunted? True, she nodded. But I am getting a bit tired of the old routine, darling. I need a challenge. I want to eat something precious. How about a policeman, a young mother, a rising star, an elderly couple, or even the mayor himself? Please give me a challenge, my darling. That way my sisters will stop looking down at me as the inexperienced sibling. We'll get there, Annie. Once we get back, I'll find something for you to prey upon. At work, I think I heard that one of my customers' sons is having a 21st birthday at a nearby park. If the customer comes back, I'll try to get as much info about that party as I can. She stuck her tongue out. I just hope I get to eat them before they get overly drunk. We'll finish them off before that happens, Annie, I chuckled. We don't want to repeat last month's blunder where you got tipsy and accidentally toppled over your own prey. I had to lick whatever was left of that woman off the ground. Ugh, my tongue tasted like mud for days. We'll sort things out and make sure that you're not scraping off the birthday boy's body from the ground. Oh, and just don't forget about the venison in my backpack. I know you love the taste of deer after people. I know. I love how you tolerate my eating habits at home. That's the only time I'm free to do that sort of thing. Well, that and monthly hunts. And the time I caused a major panic in the region when most of people's pets were eaten. You got to hand it to the owners, though. Whatever they were feeding those animals sure turned out tasty. Someone has to take care of you, Annie. I shook my head. She pushed me back down the mattress. I watched her on top of me. Her hair brushed my cheeks, her red eyes shining, teeth lengthened to knives. Her ears twitched at each tapping of the door. Come on, don't treat me like that. You know what I am. You know what I can do. I could walk into town, show what I really am, and devour anyone in sight. I bet you that a day is enough for Upper Hutt to become a ghost town. She leaned down to my ear. I heard her tongue licking her teeth. You're the real reason I can't do that. Not yet, at least. Why? I don't know. You don't even know, but I love you more and more as each day passes. Who wouldn't love a beautiful girl like you? I laughed. Her face softened back to what people considered to be normal. She held my face. She directed my right hand underneath her sweater. I don't want to think about those creatures all night long. Why would I when I have you in my arms? I brushed her cheeks with my fingertips. The tip of my thumb caressed her lips. She blushed. You are a rare case, Daniel. Thank you, I whispered, before Annie leaned her head down for a kiss. I grabbed her back tight. The rise of our breathing drowned out the large thumps that the door had to endure. The Turehu and their need for vengeance were of little concern. They were now white noise that faded off to the background. This was now. And this was our moment. That was all there was to it. A huge, huge thank you to all of my poltergeists. Alex Schaefer, Bobby Tripp, Calderin, Daniel O'Connell, Erica Warren, Forever, Shadow Blackhawk, JTX31, Mark Zapan, Brian Horn, Spirit Father, Stephen Swiftbird, Twisted Skipster, Alternative Night, and Michael Fawkes. Your donations and continued support are so appreciated. So, as always, thank you. from the very bottom of my heart. You okay? Besides the massive hangover? Yeah, I'll live. You sure? After all, you didn't say goodbye. What? I couldn't. You were passed out. I think I'm being followed. Sure you are. She's gonna get ya, lol. Ooh, you're in trouble now. Hello? You there? I told y'all not to play that stupid game.